Hello and welcome, this is Melskinner, and this is my third video discussing mechs that I would like to see added to the current list of what is slated to be included in the upcoming release of the BattleTech video game. The purpose of this video is to discuss 5 mechs, beyond the ones included in my previous videos, that I think would be a great addition to the game. I will reiterate what I said before, and that this video is meant to be a fun discussion, and I am pretty well satisfied with the mechs that have so far been announced as launching with the game. But as a fan of the BattleTech universe, there are always more mechs out there that would be fun to see in the game, but I recognize that there is a practical limit to the number that can be ultimately included. I've placed the mechs on this list in order of lightest to heaviest, and with each mech I'm going to give a brief description of its capabilities backed by stats from the tabletop game for comparison's sake, as well as the reason why I want the mech to be added to the game. I will only be discussing the standard loadout of each mech rather than any variants for simplicity's sake. This list was somewhat of a challenge to make, balancing the capabilities of the mechs I wanted to include within the restraints of the lore of each mech and the desire to bring something that would strengthen the current announced lineup of mechs. To aid me in this decision, I made a table of max damage per ton that each mech in the 3039 technical readouts could produce, as well as heat efficiency numbers, which I might go over in a future video. The goal was to give an easy and comparable reference in evaluating the capabilities of each mech. I will include this data for each of the mechs on this list for added depth of information. Starting things off is the Hornet. At 20 tons, it has a walking speed of 5 and a running speed of 8, which is below average for a light mech, although it does have jumping movement of 5 to improve its mobility in rougher terrain. At 4 tons, the Hornet has as heavy of armor as can be had at its weight. The weaponry of the mech consists of a single LRM-5, medium laser, and small laser, which produces a damage per ton ratio of 0.65. With 10 heatsinks, the Hornet is fairly heat efficient, with a heat efficiency ratio of 167% when only firing weapons, although max jumping will exceed the capabilities of the heatsinks marginally. Although having decent firepower for its weight, the Hornet sacrifices mobility for damage, which does leave it somewhat vulnerable unless in rougher terrain where it can take advantage of its jumping movement. It can be used as a scout or as a harassing skirmisher with the aid of the LRM-5. The strongest reason behind the inclusion of this mech on the list is its lore. With the BattleTech video game campaign set with the player leading a mercenary group, the Hornet is a popular mech with mercenaries and thus will fit in with the theme nicely. The 40-ton Hermes 2 has a walking speed of 6 with a running speed of 9, with no jump jets. 7.5 tons of armor is good protection at its weight, and the armament of the mech is an AC-5, 1 medium laser, and a flamer, which has a damage per ton ratio of 0.3. 10 heatsinks give the Hermes 2 a good heat efficiency ratio of 143%, and even with movement, heat should not be a concern under normal conditions. Having enough mobility and strong armor allows the Hermes 2 to serve as a heavy scout. Its main drawback is its lack of firepower, mostly overcoming lighter mechs with its strong protection and higher mass. In a lighter lance, the mech can take on a role of a frontline mech to tank damage for its lance mates. As much as I stated that I would not be discussing variants of mechs on these lists, I think it is worth mentioning that all of the variants of the Hermes 2 have higher damage outputs than the standard version, with the Mercury variant of the mech not only increasing the damage output, but also increasing the mobility of the mech. The Dervish at 55 tons has a walking speed of 5, running of 8, and has jumping movement of 5, giving it good mobility at its weight. 7.5 tons of armor is okay for its given role. Armed with 2 LRM-10s, 2 medium lasers, and 2 SRM-2s, the mech has a damage per ton ratio of 0.69. With only 10 heatsinks, the mech has a heat efficiency rating of 56%, which is exacerbated by the heat generated from the jump jets when used. An Alpha Strike will easily overwhelm the heatsinks of the Dervish, but separate use of long and close range weapons will help combat heat buildup. As an indirect fire support mech, the Dervish lacks the long-range punch of other mechs in that same role, such as the Trebuchet or Catapult, but makes up for it with good ammo stores for its long-range racks, giving increased endurance over its competitors. It backs up its long-range weapons with strong close-range firepower that falls in between the output of the previously mentioned Trebuchet and Catapult, with the SRMs enjoying generous ammo stores. Having good mobility, the main stumbling block of the Dervish is dealing with heat generation, a common woe of long-range support mechs, and a lack of strong enough armor protection to allow it to comfortably take a frontline role when the need arises. At 75 tons, the Black Knight has average for its weight, walking movement of 4, and running of 6 with no jump jets. 11 tons of armor is decent, although outmatched by several mechs at its weight and lower. The Black Knight has strong firepower consisting of a PPC, 2 large lasers, 4 medium lasers, and a small laser, producing a damage per ton ratio of 0.65. With 20 heat sinks, the mech will struggle to bring all its weapons to bear, having a heat efficiency ratio of 51%. The pilot will have to carefully pick which weapons to fire so as not to build up too much heat. The main strength of the Black Knight is its heavy firepower, outperforming most of the mechs in the heavyweight class of an equivalent role, with only the Thunderbolt and Warhammer beating it in damage per ton numbers. With an entirely energy-based arsenal, the Black Knight does not have to worry about concerns of depleting ammo or worse, an ammo explosion. It does have to deal with the heat buildup of all those energy-based weapons though, the main challenge of piloting the mech. Comparable to the Flashman, it outperforms that mech in damage potential, but as the Flashman is better protected and has an easier time dealing with heat buildup, I give it a slight edge, which is the reason the Flashman was featured in the previous list over the Black Knight. The 85-ton Longbow has a walking movement of 4, with 6 running movement and no jumping movement. With 9 tons of armor, the mech is relatively well protected for its role. Armed with 2 LRM-20s, 2 LRM-5s, and a small laser, the mech has powerful long-range firepower, coming in with a damage per ton ratio of 0.62. With 13 heat sinks, the Longbow has a heat efficiency rating of 76%. Firing all LRM racks will overwhelm the mech's ability to shed heat, limiting the number of turns they can all be fired before heat becomes a concern. A pure support mech, the Longbow has a powerful indirect fire arsenal, but has little in the way of backup firepower, only having a single small laser for closer ranges. This leaves the mech very vulnerable to being rushed by the enemy, so it is very important to place the Longbow in a well-protected location. The LRM-dependent firepower has another drawback, one of endurance. Even though the Longbow can dish out more firepower than other support mechs at range, many of the other alternative mechs in this role have decent backup firepower when ammunition stores run dry, making them still a useful asset on the battlefield. With the Longbow, this is not the case. That being said, the Longbow may have challenges that need to be overcome to use it effectively, but it is still a welcome addition to the ranks of support mechs and to heavier lance loadouts. More than likely the last video on this subject I will make, there are still good mechs to be found within those featured in this video. The Hornet and Hermes 2 serving well in the scout role, the Dervish and Longbow adding depth to the ranks of the support mechs in the game, and the Black Knight bringing a high potential damage output. I consider the Longbow and Black Knight more for advanced players, as they can be more challenging to implement properly, whereas the Hornet and Hermes 2 are fairly beginner friendly, even with their limitations. With that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this discussion through these 3 videos of mechs that I think would be a great addition to the game. There are definitely mechs that I left out for one reason or another, and I have enjoyed reading people's comments of their own personal favorites they would like to see. In any case, this is Mousegunner, signing out.